At 8 o'clock in the evening, I saw my daughter kneeling in the rain, nearly out of strength. Meanwhile, from inside the house, I could hear the laughter of her husband and his family. I helped her up, kicked the door open, and said something they would never forget. But before I continue, check to see if you have already subscribed to the channel and share in the comments where you are watching us from. We would love to know how far our stories of revenge travel. The windshield wipers of my car were working at full speed, trying in vain to clear the rain that was mercilessly pounding the windshield. In the passenger seat, the thermos was still giving off some heat. Inside, I was carrying my daughter Isabel's favorite casserole. She is 3 months pregnant, suffering from constant nausea and a poor appetite. I was just hoping a little of her homemade comfort food might help her eat something. The car stopped in front of the gate of the Thompson family's house in Beverly Hills. Even under the downpour, I could hear the loud music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses coming from inside. They were having a party. I rang the doorbell for the first time. No one came out. I waited 1 minute and pressed the button again, this time for longer. Nothing changed. The worry began to grow in my chest. Had no one truly heard the bell? I took a step back, pulled my phone from my purse, and dialed Isabel's number. No one answered. Suddenly, the ringing cut off and went straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Isabel." My heart sank. A cold shiver ran down my spine. A mother's instinct, that impossible to explain inner voice, was screaming inside me that something was terribly wrong. I ran to the living room window and pressed my face against the cold glass. The yellow light from inside illuminated an elegant scene. Jackson, my son-in-law, was sitting comfortably on the leather sofa, his eyes fixed on the television, the video game controller clenched between his fingers. His mother, Mrs. Thompson, stood beside him, sipping wine and chatting animatedly with some unfamiliar guests. Everything seemed normal, a typical gathering of wealthy people. But where was Isabel? Why wasn't she with them? I decided to walk around the house to the backyard, where there was a small side gate Isabel had shown me once. Luckily, it wasn't locked. I pushed hard, and under the dim light spilling from the window, I saw her. My heart stopped. Under the rain falling from the roof, my daughter was kneeling on the freezing flagstone patio. The floral dress she had tried on so happily last week was soaked, clinging to her thin body, outlining her barely there baby bump. Water streamed down her cheeks, mixing with her tears, making it impossible for me to distinguish one from the other. Her entire body was shaking uncontrollably, her lips blue, her hands clasped tightly over her legs. A choked cry escaped my chest. I ran to her, knelt by her side and hugged her with all my strength. "Isa, my baby. Oh my God. What happened, my love?" She lifted her head. Her eyes were open, but empty, lost. Her lips moved, her broken voice barely overcoming the sound of the rain. "Mom, I only bought a maternity dress. That's all." Such a simple, innocent sentence ignited the volcano sleeping inside me. I took off my coat and wrapped it around her trembling body. I lifted her into my arms. All the accumulated strength and fury, that of a former taekwondo athlete, that of a mother seeing her daughter humiliated, concentrated in my right leg. With a single kick, I blew the back door off its hinges. Pieces of wood flew into the luxurious living room. The noise, the music, the laughter, everything stopped abruptly. More than a dozen stares were fixed on me, soaking wet, holding my barely conscious daughter. Jackson jumped, dropping his game controller. Mrs. Thompson let go of her wine glass. I walked in, spitting out every word with a voice hoarse with rage, echoing throughout the room. "God will not forgive this cruelty." No one dared to say a word. Jackson looked at me, and in his gaze there was no remorse, only annoyance at the interruption. Mrs. Thompson looked down at Isabel in my arms, with eyes as cold as ice, without a shred of compassion. The guests stood there, motionless, like stone statues. I understood everything. In this place, with these people, there was nothing left to say. My fury meant nothing to them. The only thing that mattered now was my daughter, and the grandchild who was yet to be born. I hugged her tightly, turned, and ran back into the rain, without looking back even once. I had to get her to the hospital, immediately. The car sped off into the darkness. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. I couldn't face the image of my daughter huddled, shaking in the back seat. Her soft, broken sobs were like thousands of needles piercing my heart. The hospital lights appeared before me like an oasis. I slammed on the brakes, rushed out, and opened the back door to support Isabel's weak body. Immediately, nurses and doctors rushed toward us. The white light blinded me, and the smell of disinfectant hit me hard. They put the girl on a gurney, and the wheels squeaked across the floor as they urgently pushed her inside. "Are you family? Please wait outside," a nurse shouted. And then the spring-loaded door slammed shut, leaving me alone in that empty hallway. I felt all my strength drain away. I dropped onto a cold plastic chair, my body still trembling. It wasn't from the cold, although my clothes were still soaked, but from a silent rage that was boiling inside me. I had failed. I swore to protect her, but I let her fall into the hands of another monster. A young, kind nurse approached with a thin blanket and a mug of hot tea. "Have some, it will help you warm up." I mumbled my thanks, taking the mug with both hands. The steam warmed my numb fingers, but it couldn't melt the ice within me. I looked at my hands, shaking uncontrollably. And unintentionally, that image dragged me back in time, to another rainy night, with the same trembling hands. Many years ago, the stadium erupted in cheers of joy. The flashes never stopped flickering. I, Eleanor, the Falcon, Miller, was at the top of the podium, the National Taekwondo gold medal hanging around my neck. Below, in the crowd, Richard, my coach and husband, smiled radiantly, his eyes full of pride. We were the golden couple of American sports, sharing a dream, walking the same path. He was the wind, I, the falcon. Together we flew high toward glory. But even the strongest falcon gets tired of flying. The tragedy came in the international finals, when I attempted a spinning kick in the air. I heard a dry crack in my left knee before my brain could register the agonizing pain. My career, our dream, ended that day, on a floor drenched in sweat and tears. Richard couldn't accept the reality. He couldn't bear the Olympic ticket slipping away seconds before reaching it. The falcon had lost her wings, and to the man who once cared for them with so much love, I was now nothing more than dead weight. The broken dream transformed him into another person. Days of passionate training were replaced by empty bottles rolling under the bed. Sweet words of encouragement turned into poisonous reproaches. "Useless," he used to mutter when he was drunk. "Because of one stumble by you, you ruined my whole life." And from words, it escalated to pushing, to accidental bumps in the narrow kitchen. Isabel, who was barely 10 years old, used to run to stand between us, becoming an involuntary shield for her mother. The climax came on a night of torrential rain, just like this one. Richard came home completely drunk, babbling about lost opportunities and medals that had slipped from his hands. I just kept silent, picking up the pieces of the vase he had accidentally knocked over. Seeing me quiet angered him even more. "Are you mute, or do you feel very satisfied? You're drunk. You need to rest, Richard," I said softly. That sentence, a display of concern, became the spark that ignited his fury. A searing slap crossed my face. "You have no right to tell me what to do," he roared. At that instant, Isabel ran out of the room, her face pale with fear. She stretched out her small arms and screamed. "Dad, don't hit Mom! Go to your room!" Richard roared and pushed her aside with a swing of his hand. It was an accidental but cruel blow. The girl lost her balance and fell backward. A dry sound echoed. Her head struck the edge of the oak table. Then came her heartbreaking cry. A trickle of red blood ran from her forehead, staining her blonde braid red. At that moment, time stopped. The sleeping beast inside me woke up. I was no longer Eleanor, the submissive wife. I was the Falcon Miller, the fearless fighter. Before Richard could react, I had already lunged at him, applying a quick and accurate lock that threw him to the floor. He was stunned, unable to believe that the woman he always looked down on could strike with such decision. I didn't look at him once. I picked Isabel up in my arms, ran to the bedroom, and locked the door. That night, as I cleaned her wound with a warm cloth and watched her fall asleep amidst sobs, I made a promise to myself. It was over. I let one man destroy my life. I would never, ever allow another man to harm my daughter. The next morning, I filed for divorce alone. Despite Richard's threats and insults, I fought and obtained custody of my daughter. The hurried sound of footsteps on the tiled hallway pulled me out of the painful memories. I lifted my head sharply, my heart beating so hard it felt like it would break. The doctor, with greying hair and eyes sunken from fatigue, stood before me. He pulled down his green mask, revealing a kind face, but full of sorrow. The cold teacup in my hands became heavy. "Mrs. Miller," he began in a low, cautious voice, each word dropping like molten lead onto my chest. "We did everything we could, but your daughter suffered severe hypothermia, which caused strong uterine contractions. I am so sorry, but we could not save the baby." Crash! The porcelain cup shattered on the floor, a sharp sound that cut through all the silence. The tea splattered everywhere, but I felt nothing. My ears were ringing. The world around me became a slow-motion, silent film. The doctor's lips moved, saying something more, perhaps words of comfort, but I no longer heard them. Everything blurred. The grandchild I had waited for no longer existed. A nurse rushed to clean up the broken pieces while I remained seated, immobile, my hands hanging limp. The doctor gently placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of comfort that only made my body tremble more. Rage, pain, and helplessness mixed inside me, forming a silent storm that was ravaging my soul. They allowed me to go in and see my daughter. Isabel lay in the hospital bed, all white, lost among the sheets. Her face was pale, without a drop of colour. An IV was connected to her fragile hand, and the transparent liquid dripped, drop by drop, into her weak body. On her forehead, the old scar from that fall seemed more prominent than ever, like a bitter reminder of my failure as a mother. I dragged a chair and sat next to her. I gently took her hand, which was ice cold, and for the first time, after so many years of pretending to be strong, I cried. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks and fell onto my daughter's hand. I cried for the grandchild who never came to be, for my naive daughter, and for my own helplessness. Hours later, Isabel woke up. Her eyelids trembled and opened slowly. The first thing she did, like a natural reflex of a mother, was bring her hand to her abdomen. Her hand stopped, trembling. Her eyes opened wide, searching desperately around, until they settled on my tear-soaked face, looking for an answer. I didn't have to say anything. She understood. A choked sob escaped her throat and broke into a heart-wrenching cry. She wasn't screaming, but her crying hurt. It cut the silence of the room like a knife. "Mom!" She grabbed my arm, her swollen eyes pleading. "Mom, please don't make a scene. I beg you. I still love him. He didn't mean to do it. It was just that his mother can't stand me. Mom, please." Hearing that, the rage returned to me like a volcano about to erupt. Love? She could still say that word after everything that had happened. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her, to wake her up from her blindness. But looking at her eyes full of despair, her body so fragile, I swallowed all my venom. I clenched my fists under the chair, my nails digging into my skin. The physical pain was the only thing keeping me sane. I could only nod, with a voice so hoarse I barely recognized it as mine. "It's all right, sweetie. Rest. We'll talk later." One day passed. Isabel's phone remained silent. 2 days. No call, no message from the Thompson family. Their silence was crueler than any insult. On the 3rd day, Isabel managed to eat a little soup, but her eyes never left the door, still holding a spark of foolish hope, waiting for someone who would never arrive. Seeing her like this, my patience shattered into 1,000 pieces. I went out into the hallway and dialed Jackson's number. The call went straight to voicemail. His cheerful voice played. "Hey, it's Jackson. Leave your message. I'll call you back." I clenched my teeth in anger, hung up, and dialed his mother's number, Mrs. Thompson. It rang twice and someone answered. "Hello?" Her voice was ice cold. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Eleanor. Isabel is—" Tut, tut, tut. She had hung up. That was the last straw. I asked the nurse to watch over my daughter for a moment and left the hospital like a storm. I drove straight to Beverly Hills, toward the house that now only filled me with hatred. This time I didn't ring the bell. I pounded with my fists, again and again, against the solid oak door. After a while, the door opened. Jackson was there, his hair disheveled, in silk pajamas, with a look of annoyance at having been woken up. He looked at me with contempt and raised his chin, asking, "What the heck are you doing here at this hour?" "Why?" I yelled, my voice broken by rage and helplessness. "Why did none of you go to the hospital? Do you know that Isabel lost the baby?" Jackson smiled sideways, a cruel, disgusting grin, the most horrible I'd ever seen. "Go for what? To see your daughter's face of defeat?" He leaned against the doorframe, crossed his arms, and looked at me as if I were an annoying insect. "Your daughter is useless. That's why she couldn't keep the kid. She only knows how to spend money on senseless dresses. Let her suffer the consequences." That phrase was like an icy stab straight to the heart, twisting inside me. I stared at the man my daughter still so desperately defended. A frenzy surged through my veins, a wild need to lunge at him and destroy him. But then, for an instant, everything went silent. My burning rage subsided, leaving a calm so cold it frightened me. My blood seemed to stop. I felt nothing anymore, only a sharp clarity. I didn't say another word. I just stared into his eyes, a look that instantly erased his smile. Then I turned and walked away. This war, whether Isabel wanted it or not, I would fight myself. As I stumbled toward the car, my hands shaking as I searched for the keys in my pocket, my eyes drifted across the street. And then, through the white curtain of rain, I saw a small red dot blinking steadily under the roof of Mr. Peterson's house, directly across from the Thompsons, a new security camera. A flash of hope, faint but bright, ignited in the darkness of my despair. I stood motionless, and the memories flooded back. Last week, when I brought food to Isabel, she told me that Mr. Peterson, the neighbor, was fed up with the petty thefts in the neighborhood, so he had spent a fortune on a camera system around his house. "It never hurts to be cautious," he had said. Without thinking, I crossed the street. My heart pounded against my chest, every beat filled with hope. Mr. Peterson, a kindly retired professor, was on the porch, carefully shielding some geranium pots from the downpour. Seeing me soaked and distraught, he dropped his pruning shears, alarmed. "Mrs. Miller? What's wrong? You don't look well." My throat seized up. I tried to speak, but the words broke into sobs. I could only point toward the Thompson mansion and shake my head, helpless. Mr. Peterson didn't ask any more questions. His eyes, full of experience, seemed to understand. Without a word, he helped me inside. He made me sit in a plush armchair and went to prepare a cup of chamomile tea. "Drink this. It will warm you up, and then you can tell me," he said gently. The heat of the tea spread through my body, bringing back a little calm. I told him everything, from arriving and seeing Isabel kneeling in the rain to Jackson's cruel words. My voice trembled and broke, but I tried to recount every detail clearly. Mr. Peterson listened in silence. His kind face darkened, his silver eyebrows furrowed. He didn't offer empty words of comfort. Instead, he stood up. "Let me see," he said decisively. He led me to his study, where there was a large computer with a modern screen. He sat down, typed quickly, and lines of code and images flashed before us. "The camera behind my house points directly at the Thompsons' backyard. It has a very wide angle," he explained. He rewound the recording of the rainy night 3 days ago. My heart hammered uncontrollably in my chest. Each click of the old man's mouse was like a hammer blow to my nerves. And then it appeared. That horrifying scene showed up on the screen with cruel clarity, more real than in my own memories, which were blurred by panic. It was my daughter, kneeling under the eaves, shaking incessantly, alone and broken. The wide-angle camera had captured all the savage indifference of those inside. I clearly saw Mrs. Thompson's silhouette pass in front of the living room window, a glass of wine in her hand. She glanced outside, and then turned away with complete indifference, as if she were seeing something unimportant. I also saw Jackson sitting on the sofa, the blue and red light of the television illuminating his face as he played a game, completely oblivious to his wife, who was suffering in the cold. The silence and cruelty captured in that recording were more terrifying than any scream or insult. "Damn it," Mr. Peterson muttered angrily. "They're animals." Without another word, he connected a USB drive to the computer. The fan of the machine whirred loudly in the tense silence of the room. "You have to get justice for the girl, Mrs. Miller," he said, without taking his eyes off the screen. "Isabel was a good girl. She always came to help me water the plants when I wasn't home. I never imagined she would have to suffer something so terrible." Net. He copied the video, carefully pasted a label with the date onto the USB, and handed it to me. I took it. It was small, but it weighed as much as my daughter's fate. The next day, when I was sure Isabel was being cared for by a nurse and sleeping soundly, I took the USB drive to the office of the lawyer Amy Miller. She was a woman famous for her intelligence and toughness, recommended by an old friend from the Taekwondo team. Her office was on the top floor of a modern, minimalist, and cold building, just like her. Amy Miller had short hair and sharp, blade-like eyes. She invited me to sit down. She listened to my whole story without interrupting, without showing any emotion. Then, without a word, She connected the drive to her slim laptop. She watched the video. Her face remained serene, but I noticed how her delicate fingers tightened. When she finished, she closed the computer, laced her hands together, and looked directly at me. "This video carries a lot of weight," she said in a firm, professional voice. "But you must understand, the Thompsons have money and fame in San Francisco. They won't sit idly by. If you want justice, you'll have to fight. It will be a tough battle." "I don't care," I replied, with a determination I didn't remember ever feeling. The warmth of the tea, the fury of Mr. Peterson, and Amy's calm had given me strength. "I've already lost my grandchild. I don't intend to lose my daughter's honor too." Amy nodded. A slight professional smile appeared on her lips. "Good. Then let's begin." She drafted a legal letter, declaring my intention to sue for psychological abuse and damages to a pregnant woman's health that resulted in serious consequences. Every sentence was precise and sharp. That same afternoon, I personally took the sealed letter from the office to the post office, sent with a delivery confirmation to the Thompson house. When the brown envelope dropped into the mailbox, I heard a dry click. It was the sound of a door closing behind me. I know that from this moment on, there is no turning back. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. The tapping of the late fall rain on the window no longer sounded like a cleansing of the soul, but like a sad, endless melody that reminded me of the image of Isabel collapsed on her knees in the darkness. I tossed and turned in bed, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw the girl looking at me with those empty eyes, her lips blue. The broken sleep dragged me into a nightmare. I dreamed I was trying to lift her into my arms, but her body weighed like lead, ice cold, and it slipped away from me. I woke up abruptly, soaked in cold sweat, my heart pounding hard in my chest. The clock read 3 o'clock in the morning. Something in the air of the house had changed. A dense, suffocating stillness. I shivered. I covered my head with the blanket, trying to push away the feeling of danger that was creeping into every corner of my body. At dawn, the unease was still there, clinging to me. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was just too stressed. I prepared some hot chicken soup and some clean clothes to take to Isabel at the hospital. As always, before leaving, I checked my purse, wallet, phone, keys. But wait, where was the silver USB drive Mr. Peterson gave me? I remembered perfectly storing it carefully in the internal zippered compartment of my purse, right after leaving lawyer Amy's office. A small panic began to rise. I dumped the entire contents of my purse onto the dining table. Lipstick, keys, crumpled receipts, but no USB. Impossible. I started searching the entire living room, opening drawers, lifting the couch cushions. Nothing. My heart was pounding hard. Could I have lost it somewhere? I ran to my bedroom, hoping I had absent-mindedly left it on the dresser. But what I saw was the closet door ajar, even though I was sure I had closed it before sleeping. A chill ran down my spine. I held my breath, approached slowly, and threw open the closet door. The clothes were messed up, thrown around without order. The cardboard box where I kept documents, which was usually on top of the closet, was on the bed, open. All the pregnancy papers, Isabel's initial medical reports, the evidence Amy asked me to keep. Everything was gone. My house had been broken into. My legs gave out. I had to lean on the edge of the bed to keep from falling. The thief hadn't taken money or any valuables. He only came with one purpose: to erase the tracks. With shaking hands, I dialed Amy's number. "They broke into my house! Amy!" I cried, almost voiceless. "The USB and all of Isabel's medical reports, they're gone. Everything is lost." Amy was silent for a few seconds, the silence of someone calculating the situation. Listen to me closely, Eleanor. Her voice was firm, without a hint of nerves. Lock all the doors. Don't touch anything that might have fingerprints. I'll send my people right away. This was not a regular robbery. The Thompson family moved faster than we thought. As I locked the main bolt with trembling hands, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor from the apartment across the hall. I hesitated for a moment, but answered. Eleanor. Her voice sounded unsure, with a tone of contained curiosity. Look, your daughter Isabel. Is she okay? This morning I went to the market near the church, and the vendors were talking a lot. They were saying the girl made up the pregnancy to get money from her husband that they found out, and now she's causing a scandal to play the victim. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I couldn't say anything. I just hung up without thinking. My hands were freezing. Before I could react, another call came in, this time from a distant relative in Miami. The story was similar, but now it was embellished with even more poisonous details. They were saying Isabel had fallen into a depression after marrying, that she often had strange behaviors, and that she was now intentionally trying to blame her husband's family to cover up some secret. Rumors. They spread like wildfire in dry season. In a single morning, my battle completely turned. My daughter, who until yesterday was an innocent victim, was now seen as a crazy liar. And I, the mother seeking justice, suddenly became the crazy mother trying to destroy a respectable family. The stares, the whispers, the doubts began to surround me everywhere. When I stepped out onto the balcony for air, I saw Mrs. Rodriguez talking to some neighbors. They looked at me and immediately averted their gaze, with a mixture of pity and contempt on their faces. I felt like I was sinking into a swamp of lies. They had already gotten rid of the physical evidence, and now they were destroying our honor with an invisible but even crueler weapon. They wanted to corner us, isolate us from everyone, turn us into the neighborhood pariahs. That night, I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't know how to look at my daughter. I stayed alone in the darkness of the living room, without turning on the light, with defeat and helplessness crushing my chest. I had underestimated the cruelty and power of the Thompsons. They were not only rich, they also had the capacity to twist the truth, to turn black into white. Just when I thought I had nothing left, the phone screen on the table lit up and vibrated softly. A message from an unknown number, no greeting, no introduction, just a short, cold sentence. I have a copy of the video. If you really want justice, meet me at the Black Cat Cafe on Bleecker Street at 4 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow. Come alone. I felt my heart stop for a second, and then it started beating hard. Hope? Or one more trap? A more sophisticated one? Why would they want to lure me out of my hiding place? But at that moment, what more did I have to lose? Whether it was a spark of light or the blade of a knife waiting for me, I knew I had to go. It could be my last chance. The Black Cat Cafe was small and old, hidden in a secluded alley off the bustling commercial street, Bleecker Street. It seemed to belong to another world, detached from the noise and ostentation outside. I arrived 15 minutes early, my heart hammering in my chest. Exactly at 4 o'clock, the wooden door of the cafe opened with a creak, letting in a line of light from the street. A young woman walked in. She wore a black hooded jacket, worn-out jeans, and old boots. Her appearance contrasted completely with her family's luxury. The girl looked around cautiously, like a cornered animal, and then walked directly to my table. She sat down across from me without saying a word. Then she slowly lowered the hood. I froze. My whole body tensed. That face was familiar. It was Jackson's sister, Caroline Thompson. I had seen her a few times at the uncomfortable family dinners, always quiet, almost invisible, beside her authoritarian mother and arrogant brother. In my memories, Caroline always looked down, her shoulders hunched, as if she wanted to disappear from the world. But the girl across from me had a different look, firm and a little reckless. "Mrs. Miller," she said in a soft but determined voice, without the slightest tremor. She closed her fist and placed a black USB drive on the wooden table, pushing it toward me. "This is what you need." I stared at the USB. Then I looked at her, my head spinning. "Why?" It was the only word I could utter. The doubt inside me was stronger than the surprise. Was it another trap? A plan to make me fall? Caroline sighed, a heavy sigh, as if releasing all the weight she had been carrying. Her large, dark eyes were filled with sadness. "Because my mother was wrong, and my brother was too," she said with a quiet voice, but one in which I could feel a contained fury. "And I can't stay silent while they destroy one more innocent person." She began to speak, and her story painted a completely different portrait of life behind the luxurious gates of the Thompson family. Her dream of becoming an investigative journalist was ruthlessly crushed by Mrs. Thompson right after she graduated from college. "That's not a dignified profession for a Thompson," her mother had told her. She forced her to leave college and take art and etiquette classes, preparing her to marry the son of a wealthy associate. When Caroline refused, her mother locked her in the house, cut up her credit cards, and took away her phone. For my mother, children are just tools to achieve her goals, pieces on the board of her ambition, Caroline said bitterly. She never cared about what we really wanted or felt. She was the only one in that house who treated Isabel well. Seeing her always sad and alone, Caroline would secretly bring her books and sweets. When she found out Isabel was pregnant, she gave her some of the money she had saved. "Buy yourself something you like," she told her. "Don't let Mum control everything." She knew better than anyone how strict her mother was with her daughter-in-law's money. That night, her voice broke, with the memories reflected in her eyes. "I was in my room and heard Isabel crying outside on the patio. I wanted to go out, to protect her, but Mum had locked the door from the outside. I could only watch through the window, helpless, seeing her kneeling in the rain, alone and trembling. That image has haunted me ever since. She was just like me, a prisoner in her own house." Caroline recounted that after receiving the letter from lawyer Amy, she overheard an argument between her mother and brother. They felt no remorse. They only feared the scandal would tarnish the Thompson name. "They decided to send someone to break into my house to steal evidence and, at the same time, spread rumors to destroy our reputation, making us look like liars." When the thief got the USB, Jackson proudly showed it to his mother. That night, Caroline waited until everyone was asleep, snuck into her brother's office, and found a silver USB drive in the desk drawer. With her heart pounding hard, she copied the entire video onto her own USB. Sending someone to delete the evidence and smear a woman suffering from the loss of her child, that was the last straw, she said, her eyes glistening with tears that refused to fall. "I can't continue to be a part of this family, a family built on manipulation and lies. Mrs. Miller, please, use this. Bring the truth to light. Free Isabel, and free me too." I looked at the young woman across from me. Immense bravery emanated from her fragile body. She was betting her entire future, confronting her own family. With a trembling hand, I took the black USB drive. I felt the warmth of her fingers pass to mine, and strangely my hand no longer shook. "Thank you, Caroline," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." When I left the cafe, with the memory stick clenched in my palm, I felt as if I were holding a sword. This time, I knew I wasn't fighting alone. We were two women of different generations, cornered by the same cruelty we had found in the darkness, and together we would bring the truth to light. I walked out of the cafe with the black USB drive firmly in my hand. This time I didn't go home, nor to the hospital. I drove directly to lawyer Amy's office. She was about to leave when I almost knocked the door down upon entering. She looked up, a little surprised. But seeing my determined expression and the USB drive I forcefully placed on her desk, she understood everything. Without a word, Amy sat down and connected it to the computer. When the family video appeared on the screen, her normally cold face softened slightly. An ironic, almost imperceptible smile played at the corner of her lips. "They made a fatal mistake," Amy said, with a voice heavy with icy sarcasm. "They thought they could silence you, but instead they gave us more ammunition. This break-in and theft of evidence, once presented, will make the judge view them with terrible eyes. They have turned themselves from defendants into criminals." We stayed late that night, under the cold light of the fluorescent tubes. Amy outlined a bold plan. "Suing is not enough, Eleanor. The trial could last months. During that time, the rumors will continue to destroy your reputation and Isabel's. First, we have to clear their names. We will attack them with the same weapon they used against you: public opinion." The next morning, Amy contacted a trusted investigative journalist named Michael. We met with him at a small diner. I told him the whole story, this time with a firm voice, hardened by rage. We gave him everything. The video Caroline gave us, a copy of the hospital medical record, proving that Isabel was pregnant and lost the baby due to hypothermia. Fortunately, the hospital still had the original electronic file, as well as the detailed account of the break-in and the malicious rumors circulating. The article was published that same afternoon on a major American news portal. It was like lighting a spark in a barrel of gunpowder. Its impact was much greater than I imagined. The video of Isabel kneeling in the rain, although her face was blurred to protect her identity, was enough to shock everyone. Seeing a pregnant woman treated with such cruelty while her husband's family celebrated inside caused a wave of indignation on social media. The hashtag #JusticeForIsabel quickly soared to the top spot on Twitter trends, not only in the United States, but also in several European countries. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors and relatives who had previously turned their backs on me now called with voices full of regret and fury. Mrs. Rodriguez, stammering, apologized, saying she never imagined the Thompsons were so heartless. The media storm changed direction in just a few hours, sweeping away all the lies the Thompsons had spread. In front of the wrought iron gate of the Thompson mansion, dozens of reporters, journalists, and onlookers gathered, shouting, pointing cameras and microphones inward, demanding an explanation. Cornered, Jackson had no choice but to show his face. He appeared with an expression of false confidence, wearing an expensive designer suit, his hair carefully combed. He stood in front of a forest of cameras, initiating a clumsy and brazen farce. "It was all a staged event," he declared in a dramatic voice, waving his hands like a politician. "My mother-in-law, Eleanor Miller, out of resentment toward our family, is trying to extort us. My wife, Isabel, I love her very much, but unfortunately she has psychological issues. She constantly imagines she's pregnant, and then convinces herself she's lost the baby. There was never any child. That video was maliciously edited. We were only trying to calm her down after a nervous breakdown." Amy and I were watching the live press conference on the small television in Isabel's hospital room. Upon hearing those words, Isabel, who had been quiet as a shadow for days, burst into uncontrollable sobs. But this time, they weren't tears of weakness or confusion. They were tears of clarity and absolute pain. The last curtain had fallen, exposing the repulsive face of the man she once loved. Jackson's farce backfired spectacularly. Immediately after his statements, according to Amy's plan, the journalist Michael published the second piece of evidence, a photo of the hospital medical record with a red stamp confirming Isabel was 3 months pregnant and that the cause of the miscarriage was severe hypothermia. The second wave of indignation was even fiercer. Jackson, from being an abuser, became a cowardly liar in the eyes of public opinion. The people's anger exploded. They began to throw rotten eggs, tomatoes, and bags of garbage at the doors of the Thompson house. The screams of baby killer and liar echoed throughout the formerly quiet, affluent neighborhood. That night, in the midst of the chaos, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Caroline. Her voice was shaking with fear on the phone. "Mrs. Miller, my mother, she had a heart attack. They are taking her to the emergency room." I felt my heart sink. Although I despised what Mrs. Thompson had done, I never wished for anything like this to happen. She was authoritarian and cruel, but she was still human. I called Amy immediately. After discussing it, we decided to publish a short message on social media from the firm's account. We asked people to calm down and stop attacking the Thompson family. "Justice will be done in the courts, not in the streets," Amy wrote. Our action surprised many and sparked empathy. People began to understand that our fight was not for blind revenge, but for true justice. The media storm began to dissipate, but its impact had changed everything, especially for Isabel. Jackson's brazen farce in front of the cameras was the final blow that broke the last thread of illusion she still held. That night, after watching the conference, she turned to me. She was no longer crying. Her eyes were still swollen and red, but in them shone a firmness I had never seen in her, a strength born from the fire of pain. "Mom," she said in a hoarse but determined voice, "I want a divorce." Just that one phrase, but to me it sounded louder than any verdict. She had finally awakened on her own. I took her hand and nodded. The next morning, Amy added the unilateral divorce request to the court file. That battle was no longer just for justice, but for my daughter's freedom. On the day of the trial, the atmosphere in front of the San Francisco courthouse was as tense as a stretched rope. The room was packed. Journalists from all the major news outlets occupied every corner, crammed into the back seats. I sat next to Isabel, tightly squeezing her hand. It was ice cold, but it wasn't trembling. Amy was beside us, calm and focused, like a general before the decisive battle. The courtroom door opened. Jackson walked in, accompanied by his lawyer, his face smoother than an egg. He no longer had that confident and arrogant air from before. His face was haggard, with deep, dark circles. He glanced quickly at us and immediately lowered his head. Mrs. Thompson did not appear. They said it was due to health problems. The trial began. Jackson's lawyer tried to twist everything, attacking Isabel's unstable mental state. They called some neighbors, who we later learned had been paid, to testify. They fabricated stories about Isabel being sad, depressed, and having strange behaviors. They wanted to paint her as a weak, paranoid, untrustworthy woman. I felt my blood boil, but Amy placed a hand on mine, urging me to keep calm. However, all their effort collapsed when it was our turn to present the evidence. Amy stood up, with a firm demeanor and a clear voice that resonated throughout the room. She showed the original video. The entire courtroom fell silent. Only the sound of the rain and the wind could be heard in the recording. On the large screen appeared the image of my daughter kneeling in the rain, silent, but with an accusatory power stronger than 1,000 words. I heard sobs among the audience. Some women couldn't hold back their tears. The judge, an older man with a stern face, watched intently, his brow furrowing more and more. "Your Honor," Amy said in a firm tone. "The evidence does not end here." She called the next witness. "Miss Caroline Thompson to the stand." The room filled with murmurs. Jackson lifted his head abruptly, his eyes blazing with surprise and fury. The side door opened and Caroline walked in. She wore a simple white blouse, black pants, and looked much more mature. Her face was serene. She faced her brother's furious gaze without wavering. She walked up to the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. In a clear and firm voice, she recounted everything that had happened. She spoke of her mother's suffocating control and her brother's violent and temperamental nature. She told how they treated Isabel like a maid, controlling her money, criticizing every piece of clothing she wore. She said it was she who copied and gave me the video after hearing how they planned to steal the evidence and smear our name. My brother said Isabel was useless, that she only wasted money on silly dresses, Caroline recounted, her voice trembling with emotion. But the truth is, she bought that maternity dress with the little money I secretly gave her. It was her only small joy during the pregnancy. All eyes turned toward Jackson. His face turned pale, then red with shame and fury. "I am here today," Caroline concluded, looking at the judge with clear eyes, without any fear. "Not to go against my family. I am here for the truth, for what is right, for my sister-in-law, and for the baby who never came to be." Her testimony was a death blow. All the lies, all of Jackson's attempts to twist the truth, were exposed as ridiculous. His lawyer could only lower his head and scribble aimlessly. Jackson stared at the table, his shoulders slumped like a defeated man. The trial ended. The judge did not need to deliberate much. The court declared Jackson Thompson guilty of psychological violence and of intentionally causing harm with serious consequences. He was sentenced to 2 years of conditional imprisonment, 3 years of supervised probation, and the obligation to attend anger management classes. Furthermore, he had to pay a large sum as compensation for the physical and emotional damages Isabel had suffered. Isabel's unilateral divorce request was immediately approved. When the judge hit the table with the gavel, a dry crack resonated in the room, marking the end of the trial, the end of a dark chapter in my daughter's life. I turned and hugged her tightly. Isabel buried her face in my shoulder, and her body trembled, crying. But this time they were tears of liberation. After the trial, our life slowly returned to its course. Isabel packed her things and moved in with me permanently. My small house by the Hudson River, which had been silent since she got married, was filled with laughter and voices again. We cooked together, tended the pots on the balcony, and watched old movies. Sometimes I found her sitting on the porch, her gaze lost in the slowly flowing river, her hand resting unintentionally on her abdomen. The soul's wounds take longer to heal than a court sentence. That loss would always be an impossible void to fill in her heart, and in mine too. About 2 weeks after the trial, one sunny afternoon, while we were arranging some pots of carnations, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, and Caroline's sad voice came through the line. "Mrs. Miller," she said hoarsely. "My mother. She passed away this morning at the hospital." The small trowel in my hand fell to the ground with a dry clank. Isabel looked at me with concern. I could only look at her and nod in silence. A heavy silence covered our small balcony. Although Mrs. Thompson had caused so much pain, the news of her death filled me with sadness. It wasn't the satisfaction of the winner, not at all. It was grief for a life that destroyed itself and those around it with its own cruelty and authoritarianism. She paid too high a price for her mistakes. I did not attend the funeral. Isabel didn't either. We thought our presence would only open unnecessary wounds, and probably no one would want it. Instead, I sent an arrangement of white lilies, a symbol of purity and rebirth, to the wake. Along with it, a small card without a sender, with a single sentence, "May the soul of the deceased rest in peace." Days after the funeral, Caroline came to my house. She looked thinner and paler, but in her eyes there was no longer fear or sadness. They shone with a new calm and freedom. She wore a simple light blue dress and carried a small suitcase in her hand. "I am leaving San Francisco, Mrs. Miller," she said with a soft smile. "I have re-enrolled in the School of Journalism in New York City. I am going to start over." Isabel approached and hugged her. Two women, two victims of the same family drama, found comfort in each other. "Thank you, Caroline. Thank you for everything," Isabel whispered. "Live well, please." "You too, Isa," Caroline replied, gently patting her former sister-in-law's back. Before leaving, Caroline took a cream-colored envelope from her purse, somewhat wrinkled and old. "This is from my mother," she said with a hesitant tone. "She wrote it after entering the hospital, but she never had the courage to send it. I think you and Mrs. Isabel should read it." She handed me the envelope. Her hand was ice cold. Then she dragged her suitcase and walked straight to the waiting taxi on the street, without looking back even once. An old chapter of her life had just closed forever. That night, after dinner, my daughter and I sat on the sofa under the warm light of a yellow lamp. I carefully opened the letter. Mrs. Thompson's handwriting trembled, clumsy and messy, without the proud and firm touch that had always characterized her. It seemed written in her final hours, when pride no longer meant anything. It was not a long letter. She did not ask for forgiveness, because perhaps she knew she did not deserve it. She wrote about her life, about being born into a noble family that had fallen on hard times, about the burden of maintaining the name and prestige of a crumbling lineage, a burden she had carried on her shoulders since she was a young woman. The fear of being looked down upon had turned her into a hard, controlling woman who saw her children as chess pieces to strengthen her position. She admitted having been wrong to try to turn Jackson and Caroline into puppets. And her biggest mistake, her unforgivable guilt, was having destroyed Isabel's life, indirectly snatching away her chance to be a mother. "My silence that rainy night," she wrote. "It was the stab that ended the life of my own grandchild." And at the end, in an almost illegible section, one could read, "I cannot repair what I did, nor bring the baby back to life, but I can prevent other women from going through the same thing." Along with the letter came a copy of her will. Mrs. Thompson had decided to leave almost all of her personal fortune, a considerable sum, to a foundation in California dedicated to protecting women and children who are victims of domestic violence. Isabel and I looked at each other, our eyes filled with tears. It was not a pardon. There are wounds that cannot be forgiven. But it was a belated attempt at redemption, the last effort to rescue a lost soul. The price of her mistakes was too high, but at least, at the end of the road, she chose to do something right. A year passed in the blink of an eye. San Francisco bloomed again in spring. The orange trees along the streets were covered with white blossoms, filling the air with a sweet, clean scent that crept into every corner, as if trying to erase the sorrows of the past. Isabel's life and mine had changed greatly. Mrs. Thompson's letter and act of atonement had allowed Isabel to let go of the last burden of resentment. She no longer lived trapped in the past. With the compensation from Jackson and a small capital I contributed, Isabel fulfilled the dream she had held for years. She opened a small fashion design studio, hidden on a cobblestone street in the old Greenwich Village neighborhood. She called it Rebirth. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. Her studio didn't follow flashy trends. She designed elegant and comfortable clothes that highlighted women's natural beauty, especially mothers. Isabel's maternity dresses were not only beautiful, but conveyed a feeling of tenderness and protection. At first, the business was difficult, but with talent and hard work, she gained loyal customers. They came to the studio not just to buy clothes, but to feel understood. I, a retired taekwondo athlete, ended up becoming her accidental manager. I took care of the accounts, the paperwork, and dealing with suppliers so she could dedicate herself completely to creating. Every day, seeing my daughter concentrated among the rolls of fabric and the sewing machine, seeing how her smile flourished again, I feel a peace I had never felt before. The faint scar on her forehead is still there, but it is no longer a reminder of pain, but a sign of the strength she carries within, of her ability to get up after falling. Sometimes we receive postcards from Caroline. They are postcards with images of squares and museums in New York City. She is a brilliant student and has already published her first investigative articles in the university magazine. She tells us about her free life, about her new friends, about the broad horizons that await her. We are happy for her. She had the courage to escape her golden cage, to pursue her own dream. One weekend afternoon in April, after the last customer left, my daughter and I were about to close the studio when it suddenly started to rain. The clear, firm drops hit the roof as if marking a rhythm. But this rain was not cold or sad like the one from years ago. It was fresh, clean, smelling of wet earth and new leaves, washing the dust off the cobblestone streets. It stopped as quickly as it came. The sky opened up again. The sun shone bright and warm. "Shall we go for a walk, Mum?" Isabel proposed, her eyes bright. We walked together, shoulder to shoulder, along the bank of the Hudson River. The air after the rain felt pure, fresh. The sunset light fell on the wet pavement, reflecting sparkles as if someone had scattered thousands of diamonds. And then a beautiful, seven-colored rainbow appeared, crossing the sky and uniting the two banks of the river. Isabel stopped, looked up, and took a deep breath, filling her chest. Then she looked at me, her eyes clear, with no trace of sadness, only peace and hope. "Thank you, Mum," she said softly like a sigh. "Thank you for always being with me, for fighting for me, even when I already wanted to give up." I smiled, put an arm around her, and hugged her. Her hair still smelled of fabric and the new sun. "I will always be here," I whispered to her. "Always. I know that challenges still await us, that there are scars on the soul that never completely disappear. But we have learned to live with them. As long as we are together, we can overcome anything. The storm has passed, and after the rain, the light always returns. From everything I experienced, I understood something. In this life, no rain lasts forever, and no darkness is dense enough to hide the light of truth. The silence of the cowards only feeds evil, but courage, whether it comes from an elderly mother or a young woman like Caroline, can tear down the coldest walls. I have lost, I have fallen, but amidst the pain, I learned that justice is not always found in a courtroom, but in the way we rise up and fight for what is right, even if the whole world turns its back on us. And more than anything, I want to tell all the women out there, never let fear or a blind love silence you. Speak up, because silence is sometimes an accomplice to the crime. The story you have just heard has changed names and locations to protect the identity of the people involved. We are not telling it to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and reflects. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own home? I sincerely wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to keep quiet to maintain the peace, or would you have the courage to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can be a candle that lights the way for another. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the final screen, I will leave two of the channel's most loved stories. I think they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.